everybody, today we are talking about a topic that is quite controversial. You already saw the title. Today we are talking about migration. Migration has been a huge topic, especially over the last 3 years. Over these past 3 to 5 years, we've seen a lot of celebrities and social media influencers who've had filler in their lips over a long period of time. And over that long period of time, their lips start to look a little distorted, a little weird, a little odd. Now we finally have a word to describe what that is, and that's migration. And if you don't know me, my name's Jasmine. I'm a registered nurse and I've been working in medical aesthetics for almost 10 years. And if you ask me, it's been quite a wild ride to see the trends come and go over the past years. And if you ask me, we shouldn't be injecting faces to keep up with trends. I don't think our faces should be trends. When I'm talking about migration, I'm referring to the long-term drift of filler that creates unwanted aesthetic outcomes. Now, the first point that I'd like to address is that of the Victorian Institute YouTube video. Everybody knows that one YouTube video that I'm talking about. The main physician in that video talks about why he no longer uses dermal filler for faces due to finding out that filler lasts a lot longer than we originally thought. Another physician talks about his findings with MRI. With MRI, he found that some filler lasted upwards of 10 years. And I'm not sure if he talked about it in the YouTube video, but he also found that filler had migrated from the tear trough to inside the orbit of the eye. If I'm not being clear, he did find this with MRI as well. If he didn't talk about that in the YouTube video, I believe he is working on or has published an article about that. I think the article is published. I also think it's fine for me to mention his name, Dr. Master, who is highly respected. I do remember he recently talked on Instagram about his experience dissolving filler. Now, I'm not sure if he talked about this in the YouTube video, but that same physician also found filler post-septal, meaning behind this area. He also recently talked about his experience dissolving post-septal on Instagram. It seems really tricky. Now, when I'm talking about migration, I'm talking about the long-term diffusal or the long-term drift of filler that will create unwanted aesthetic outcomes. I'm not talking about filler moving from one area to a completely different area, because that is extremely rare where there are individual case studies on cases like the filler that was found post-septal. Now, filler truly moving to different areas of the face, that is really extremely rare. How do I know if I have migration? Let's talk about the two most common areas that we see migration in. Those are the lips and the tear trough. Now, why are these the two most common areas to see migration? It's because these two muscles are sphincter muscles, and we use these muscles a lot. Every blink, every mouth movement, we are using these sphincter muscles. These sphincter muscles move in and out, kind of like this. Maybe I should show you this way. Fillers that are used in the lips and in the tear trough, they should be hyaluronic acid-based filler. These cross-linked hyaluronic acid molecules draw fluid to it. If you know even a little bit of skincare, you know that hyaluronic acid, even topically, draws a lot of fluid to it. So with the lips, for example, if we have filler placed in the body of the lips, and over the years, of course, we're gonna move our mouth, contract these sphincter muscles. Imagine these cross-linked hyaluronic acid molecules slowly kind of shifting outwards. And probably not all of the syringe. You're not gonna get 1 full ml of filler that is out here, because yes, your body will break these down slowly. Now, it may not break down all of it. Over the past maybe roughly 3 years, I have changed the way that I talk to patients about filler in the lips. Now, every patient who comes in to get lips with me, I educate a little differently. Usually I'll say something like this. As we layer filler over the years, it is going to last longer and longer. The more we layer, the longer it lasts. And this filler can shift a little bit, especially when layered. And some people are more or less prone to that. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it is a good practice to anticipate dissolving in the future. I like to say that our body loves to break down that good filler right in the body of our lip. The filler that we want seems to go away more quickly. But if filler does happen to migrate, especially outside of the lip border, that's where filler can really stay for a long time. I've seen many patients who've told me that they haven't had filler in their lips for anywhere from 1 to well over 10 years. And the filler that is outside above the vermilion or below in the wet border or mucosa of the lips, it does stay for an extremely long amount of time. It is possible your body may break that down slowly, but it's not super likely. It's possible that your body may break down the migration over time, but just from experience, that doesn't really seem to happen. So once again, filler loves to disappear where we want it the most, and it loves to hold on where we don't want it the most. So if we do see a little bit of migration over the years, it is a best practice to dissolve. Think of this as like a nail fill. If you're getting your nail fill with acrylic, whatever medium you choose, as your nails grow out, you don't want to keep filling. There is a point where you do want a new set. And fun fact, you actually don't have to fully dissolve your lips. It is possible to just try to dissolve what is outside of the lips. Now, from my experience, from my own lips, and from my patients, when we dissolve just the outside, the body does seem to shrink just a little bit. I also think that the volume outside the vermilion of the lips makes us think that we have bigger lips, so when we see that volume break down a little bit, we tend to think our lips are smaller. So how do I know if I have migration? Take a look at the border of your lip. How strong is your border? If it's very sharp, you probably don't have migration. Let's take it back a few steps. You have the pink of your lip and you have the white of your lip. The end of that pink, now I'm wearing lip liner and lip gloss, but that pink of your lip is where the crisp part of your lip should end. Sometimes we refer to right outside the pink of our lips as the white roll of the lips. If you have puffiness in the white roll of your lips, or you're just full on getting a filler mustache or a second lip, then that is probably migration. Now, a very small amount of people do have a natural larger white border. And if you're an injector and you're watching this, make sure you take pictures for your patients for their file and you educate that they have a stronger white border. I find that if they have a stronger white border, they could be more prone to migration. Another way that you can tell if you have migration is if you turn your lips to the side or your face to the side, or you take a side profile selfie and you find that where the pink is not where that crisp is, or that little ski slope is actually a rounded ski slope. Another way you can tell is if you smile, and when you smile, you find that the lift or the border of your lip is outside where that pink is. The best way I could describe this is puffiness. Now I'm gonna tell you how you can avoid migration. In my opinion, the technique is what really can contribute to the migration. I think there are 3 major factors for migration. The main one is the injector's technique. Another one is the patient's anatomy. And the third one is the product type. So injector's technique. I'm pretty vocal about techniques that I'm not the biggest fan of, specifically the Russian technique. And this is why I said earlier, I don't believe that trends belong on our faces. The Russian technique goes by many different names. You can also call it tenting. You can also call it the Julie Horn technique. I classify these class of techniques as anything that injects through or above the vermilion border and kind of lifts its way up. Now I'm critical of these techniques, but I actually use some of these techniques myself sparingly. So of course it is perfectly fine used in the right hands, but I can usually spot these techniques being used from a mile away. And I think that's a problem because I do believe that good filler, good Botox, good anything shouldn't be visible to the eye. Your eye shouldn't be drawn to an area that has had some type of treatment. It should be used to optimize what we currently look like. It's supposed to enhance our natural beauty. Now there is a prominent physician in the UK who actively speaks out against these techniques. His name is Dr. Harris. I believe he's in the UK. And something that I love that he's done is he's created grades for the severity of migration. Now I don't know these by heart, maybe someday I will, but he gives names to how severe the migration is. Now these techniques are very controversial. For one, Russian tenting or Julie Horn techniques do provide the most lifting effect for the lips, in my opinion. Now something that I do need to explain is that filler travels through the path of least resistance. So whatever tool we're using, if it's a needle or a cannula, if you don't know what a cannula is, don't worry. It's a long blunt tool used to replace a needle. But when we use any tool to place filler, that needle or that cannula creates a path, and when the filler is being injecting, it can travel up the path of least resistance. Now injectors say that injecting retrograde can avoid this from happening, and retrograde means that we're pushing filler as we're pulling the needle out, or whatever tool. Now there was a point in time where I loved using these lifting techniques, and for many patients it was fantastic. But for patients with the anatomical characteristics that made them more prone to migration, I found that they would get migration faster. So when I would inject with a tenting or ferning or Russian technique, no matter how little I pushed the filler, even if I was moving, you could still kind of see filler traveling up that needle. And in some cases, you could even see filler traveling up the needle and then through that vermilion border, kind of like a little fountain. Now this can be really difficult to see, so it really takes a keen eye. And it might sound terrible that I'm talking about this, like, oh no, you know, her patients were done dirty. Now thankfully our clinic has a system to where if we need a touch up or follow up in 2 weeks, we do. And if I were to see any migration, I would be able to take care of that. I do believe that all clinics should do the same. I think it's ethical. So going back to filler being packed in that vermilion border, our vermilion border should be sharp. Initially, filler in that vermilion border looks so sharp and crisp, it's stunning. But over time, that hyaluronic acid is going to draw fluid towards it. And that once crisp filler, even in a couple weeks, a couple months, especially over a couple years, you find that hydration effect blends or distorts the sharp vermilion border. So when I use these techniques, I don't go through or from above the vermilion border, I go from underneath, so that if it does track up, because it does, no matter how perfect or slow or that tiny amount of pressure that you push through a needle, if it does track up, it's staying within the lip. And I use these techniques very, very sparingly, usually just for asymmetries. If this is the case, why isn't everyone walking around with severely migrated lips? Because everyone's lip shape is different. Now, I kind of naturally have a softer vermilion border. If you Google a picture of Rihanna's lips, her vermilion border is sharp. And if she had a little migration, her borders are so sharp that it wouldn't really matter. It's not really gonna change her lips. But someone who has a softer border, a little bit of migration makes a lot of a difference. You wanna know how to get migration as quickly as possible? You try to grow the size of your lips as fast as possible. If we're layering and packing filler into our lips, even if the best techniques are used, that filler builds up, it gets so tight. There's a science word to describe this. I don't think it's osmosis, it might be something, but when there are more molecules on one side, less molecules on the other, it's going to kind of dissipate to create balance. And so when the lip is packed so tight, it's gotta go somewhere and it's gonna shift. And that's where we can see migration. Patients with smaller lips, their lips get packed more quickly. So patients with smaller lips are more prone to migration as well. It's really tricky to grow small lips because we want to grow it really quickly. But when we do that, we build that filler up in such a small space in such a small amount of time, and then we see migration. I've had many patients with thinner lips who really want to see their lips quickly. But think of it as like training your lips. It's really about the long term. We don't want to pack your lips and you have a fantastic result right now, and in a couple months or even in a couple years, your lips look distorted. When I'm injecting thinking of your lips many years from now, not just today. So soft border, smaller lips, trying to grow the size of our lips really quickly, heavy lifting techniques. I think that covers most of it. Now we can talk about a very controversial topic, that is product choice. So there are so many different types of hyaluronic acid based fillers. Some of them are as fine and thin as water, and some of them are as thick and used to imitate bone structure. And then you have the spectrum all the way in between. One way we describe the characteristics of filler is by using G'. When I'm talking to patients, I describe G' as how robust that filler is. So going back to the many different types of filler, from fine like water to thick and strong like bone, what we're using for lips, it's kind of about here. There can be more robust fillers and there can be very soft, fine fillers, but they're all pretty squishy to be used for the lips because this is soft, squishy tissue. I'm just gonna list out some of the fillers that can be used for the lips. Juvederm Ultra XC, Juvederm Ultra Plus XC, Restylane Refine, Restylane Define, Restylane Kiss, Restylane L or normal Restylane, Volbella, RHA2, RHA3, Restylane Silk. Now these are US fillers, so I'm probably missing fillers from the UK or from Europe. That also applies to Asia as well. But there are so many different types of fillers. Now the filler that gets the most scrutiny for causing migration is Juvederm. Okay, here we go. So Juvederm is a family of fillers, as is Restylane is a family of fillers. There is normal Restylane, that is Restylane L, but there's also Restylane Refine, Restylane Define, Restylane Kiss, Restylane Lift, Restylane, all the Restylines. And then same thing for Juvederm. There's Juvederm Ultra Plus XC, Juvederm Ultra XC, Juvederm Voluma, Juvederm Volbella, Juvederm Velour. So when we're referring to just Restylane or just Juvederm, we mean Restylane L or Juvederm Ultra Plus XC or Juvederm Ultra XC. So if you had Juvederm in your lips, you had Juvederm Ultra Plus XC or Juvederm Ultra XC. Now XC is like extra letters, so I actually don't really say the XC. Most people will get Juvederm Ultra Plus XC. If you compare Juvederm Ultra Plus XC with Juvederm Ultra XC, they're actually extremely similar. I have had both in my own lips and I didn't feel too much of a difference. I'd say do your own research on that because that's a whole YouTube video in itself. But Juvederm gets a lot of scrutiny for causing migration in the lips. Juvederm is quite the juicy filler, and Juvederm is also slightly more robust as well. Now it's not very robust when compared to Juvederm Juvederm Voluma or to Restylane Lift, which is also, Restylane Lift is also used in the lips, frequently for the Russian technique. But I'm just gonna shut down the rumors now. Yes, Juvederm can be injected and can not create migration. It really comes down to the hand. Now, Juvederm is not the same product as Restylane Refine, Restylane Define. The extent in which it draws fluid to itself, they're all a little different for all of these fillers. And Juvederm draws a little bit more. So when an injector uses Juvederm and puts an extreme amount in the vermilion border, it's gonna draw a decent amount of fluid and it's gonna change what their lips look like. And this is why when I'm using Juvederm, I'm mostly using it in the body of lips. Yes, I can use some lifting techniques, again, very sparingly, but Juvederm can be used to create fantastic long-term results. It really just depends on your injector. So if you don't think you have that great of an injector, first of all, run for the hills. But I guess you could request something with a lower G prime, like Restylane Kiss, Restylane Refine. Or if we're talking about Allergan, you could ask for Volbella. Now I want you to know that when I'm talking about the different fillers, I do feel like all the pharmaceutical companies are watching me, even though I'm sure there is some extent of spotlight effect. And so talking about this is extremely difficult. Now these are my opinions. I am not referencing any studies yet, but if you want to learn about it, this is called RHEOLOGY, RHEOLOGY. RHEOLOGY is talking about the different characteristics of fillers, such as G prime. But taking a couple steps back, yes, you can create migration with Restylane Kiss, Restylane Refine, Restylane Define, Volbella, Restylane Silk, whatever you want to think that doesn't cause migration, it can all cause migration. And at the same time, all of these fillers can also not cause migration. Now that I have made that super complicated, let's move on. Now we're gonna talk about the tear trough. The tear trough is another controversial topic. I do believe that injectors are collectively learning that dermal filler or hyaluronic acid dermal filler is not the best option for the tear trough. It is a good option if we have a volume deficit, and it's not a very good option if we have protruding or visible eye bags. That eye bag is the inferior orbital fat pad. Here, I'll show you mine. When you look up to the sky, you can see these a little easier, and this circle all the way around, that is our orbicularis retaining ligament, also known as ORL. The orbicularis retaining ligament is a true osteocutaneous ligament. When I'm describing what ligaments do, I like to say they act like tacks to a wall. If you take a tack, you tack it to the wall. They're kind of holding everything in its place or creating compartments. And that's why when the fat pad here, the inferior orbital fat pad, starts to protrude forward with age, it kind of hangs over the ligament. So the osteocutaneous ligament is a true bone to skin ligament. And with that, I do believe that if filler is placed deep, that it does travel up the osteocutaneous ligament and creates these superficial little bubbles. Another thing that I see is when a filler is placed heavily above the ligament, not above, but like more anteriorly, that filler likes to get caught on that ligament and create a ridge right above the ligament. I'm sure this sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but I hope some of it is kind of getting through. Now for a very jaw-dropping conclusion, no, I don't believe that filler is the best for the tear trough. And yes, I do still inject the tear trough with dermal filler. I'm extremely meticulous about my tear troughs, and my choice is to use very, very thin fillers, very superficially, usually with a cannula, always with a cannula, and that must be done very sparingly. The tear trough is a very delicate area. It's very thin, and so irregularities are extremely noticeable. I choose more thin fillers because I find that thicker fillers, one, draw more fluid, but two, are more likely to leave a noticeable Tyndall effect. The Tyndall effect is the blue appearance when light hits water. So when you see a collection of blue, especially around the ligament, not so much from our blood vessels, because that can also look a little blue. Typically it's around here, it creates a little ridge. And if it's blue, that is the Tyndall effect. And if you see this, you do need to dissolve it. Again, the tear trough is a very delicate area that patients love to perfect, but we're always going to see our ligament and we're always going to see our fat pad. And so trying to perfect these structures typically leads to overdoing it, especially over time as that filler draws fluid to the area. That was a lot of learning for us today. Please ask any questions that you have in the comments. And if this has provided answers or clarity for you, please like and subscribe. I am an extremely honest person and I want to talk about these controversial topics with as much transparency as possible. So I really appreciate all of the support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.